What's up guys, Moolah here, and I'm in Columbia, South Carolina today at the Greenlawn Memorial Cemetery to check out the graves of two professional wrestlers that I remember from my childhood, even though they were quite older at the time. Very respected and very influential. We're going to go look at the graves of the wonderful Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young, and we're going to talk about them a little bit, so let's do it. Way to get in here is you come through the main gate, you go around, it loops around here, and as soon as you go through the loop you can see it. It's a very large monument and Mae is right next to her. Some essentials out of the way. Mary Lillian Ellison, born July 22nd, 1923, died November 2nd, 2007. And here on her epitaph it says, born Mary Lillian Ellison in Tukidoo, South Carolina, the daughter of Henry and Mary Ellison, was raised by her father and 12 brothers after passing of her beloved mother at 40 years of age. Moolah, a beloved mother and grandmother, also loving and appreciative of family, friends, and fans, the goddess of the square circle, won her first pro wrestling match in 1949, won the Ladies World Championship in 1956, and held the championship for 29 years. She was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 1995. At the young age of 80, the Fabulous Moolah signed a 5-year contract in 2003 with Vince McMahon and won a pro wrestling match on her 80th birthday in Columbia, South Carolina. And it says, doubt sees obstacles, faith sees the way. Doubt sees the blackest night, faith sees the day. Doubt dreads to take its step, faith soars on high. Doubt questions who believes, faith answers I. And you see someone has recently left, perhaps some family. Like I said, she is native to this Columbia area, has left a little wreath and some flowers. And it says, if tears could build a stairway and memories a lane, I'd walk right up to you and something and bring you home again. So like you was saying, her mother passed away pretty young, while she was young, so her father would actually take her to pro wrestling matches, and that's when she saw Mildred Burke. Mildred Burke was the women's champion at the time in the 40s, and she became inspired, and she knew from that point on that there's nothing else she wanted to do. She wanted to be a pro wrestler. She wanted to be like Mildred Burke. She wanted to be the champion. Now, her father did not approve of this. He did not think she should become a pro wrestler, so she actually ran away, and she eloped, and she got pregnant. And the marriage did not last, but she was able to find a promoter, and that promoter was none other than Mildred Burke's husband, Billy Wolf. And Billy actually had a reputation for being quite abusive, and not only to the women that he promoted, but Mildred herself. She actually ended up leaving him. And Moolah, she did not like it. She didn't want to be treated that way. She didn't think that was the way to get into the business. It did help her find connections, but as soon as she could, she did get out. A driving force behind that was Billy Wolf would actually a lot of times negotiate putting women on cards by having them sleep with him, because at this time, keep in mind, women's wrestling was kind of considered like C tier. It's kind of like a novelty. It wasn't really men's wrestling was considered the only real wrestling, and if you weren't doing that, then it just wasn't real at that point. So during that time that she left, she actually went to New York and she met another promoter, and he was willing to take a chance on her. She didn't have a whole lot of experience, and he asked her why she wanted to become a pro wrestler, and she says, I want to make money. I want to make that moolah. And he was like, Moolah, that's a good name. That's your name. That's your wrestling name. And I don't know if he put the Fabulous on there or if he just said Moolah, but that's how it became the Fabulous Moolah. And with her connections in New York, she actually became the first woman to wrestle in Madison Square Garden. Was the very first. And she soon married a character named Buddy Lee. Now, Buddy was not a really good character. They trained girls together, and they started doing more than that, and he booked and promoted. Well, she came home one day, and he was actually in bed with one of the trainees, and she threw him out, left him, and she started her own training program in her own compound here in Columbia, which today is just a halfway house type thing. And she began promoting and training women, and a lot of the pro wrestling women that came later on in those eras were trained by her. They at least trained by her, or at least met her and had her good blessings. If they wanted to become a pro wrestler at that point in time, Moolah was a person to go through if you were a woman. And she did eventually become the world champion, and she actually held it from 1959 to 1983. And the reason being 1983 being the end is Cyndi Lauper, pop star. She met Captain Lou Albano. He used to be the manager of the Wild Samoans, and he was very well known in wrestling. Well, Cyndi met Lou, and this kind of started the whole rock and wrestling connection that happened even throughout to the Attitude Era. And so Fabulous Moolah knew Vince McMahon was about to do something big. So they got in negotiations, and the idea was to have her face Wendi Richter, which she trained. Wendi was much younger. People thought she was very beautiful, and they thought that she was the next face. They wanted a new youth movement in wrestling. They were trying to do that, you know, to grow the WWF. So she agreed to sell her championship and the rights to it to Vince McMahon and have a match with Wendi Richter, where Captain Lou Albano, he was the manager for the Fabulous Moolah, and the manager for Wendi Richter was Cyndi Lauper. Cyndi was just a big wrestling fan, so she really jumped at it. And it's said that Vince and other officials in the WWF thought that losing to Wendi Richter winning would actually add some legitimacy to her title reign, because the Moolah was so well known and respected and revered. But Wendi then said that she started wanting to be paid more like the male wrestlers. And then so they booked her in a match with the Spider Lady, a masked wrestler who she had wrestled before. Except this time, it obviously was a person in the suit that was a different person. Well, she wrestled her, and there was a quick 3 count. Wendi says it was not a 3 count. It was entirely set up, was not a 3 count. And when they unmasked her, it was a Fabulous Moolah. She had won her title back. And people say, as much as she did for women's pro wrestling and the advancement of it, that kind of did set it back, and I kind of agree. And she lost the title soon after. It wasn't meant to be hers long, it was more an angle. And they kind of went away from wrestling until 1998, when her, Fabulous Moolah, and Mae Young made an appearance with the WWF, where they had an angle with Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett smashed the guitar over Moolah's head and performed his finisher on Mae Young, and it was so popular that these two ladies, they decided, hey, we still got it. We want to do this. We want to be pro wrestlers. We are pro wrestlers. We live, breathe, and sleep pro wrestling. So they went and they negotiated a contract and said, we want to come back. And sure enough, they signed them to a deal, and they did come back. And during that point, they started making semi-regular appearances over the next, like, several years. Which leads me, let's talk about the wonderful Mae Young. Let's read her thing. So, Johnny Mae Young, born March 12th, 1923, died January 14th, 2014. Born Johnny Mae Young in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, the daughter of John and Lily Mae Young, would become the Great Mae and be considered one of the toughest in the wrestling business. A career that began in 1940 would span 7 decades. In 1945, the Great Mae would be the only lady to wrestle champion Mildred Burke to a 30-minute draw in Louisville, Kentucky, and was an undefeated U.S. champion lady wrestler. At the age of 80, the Great Mae and her partner in the squared circle, the Fabulous Moolah, would sign a 5-year contract with WWE, and together win a pro wrestling match in Columbia, South Carolina in 2003. And it says, "Death, where is thy sting? Grave, where is thy victory? We have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens." Now, she was very interested in pro wrestling from a young age. When she was in high school, she actually attended a match that Mildred was wrestling in at an event, and she requested, she wanted a match with the champion. She wanted a match with the champion, and the promoters would not let that happen. She was like, "Mildred, are you scared?" But the promoters wouldn't let it happen, and instead they had her actually wrestle someone else, and she actually won. At the time, you know, she was in high school. She actually was the only woman on her high school wrestling team at that time. It is a very windy day here in Columbia. Oh my gosh. And that appearance kind of drew popularity. She later did become a pro, and she actually became a heel. She was a bad guy, and she went during the 1940s when the men actually went off to fight. They were, you know, as you know, in baseball, women played baseball, and you know, to pass time and have, you know, help entertain people here. Well, women's wrestling really took off a lot in that time, and she became known as the Great Mae, and she wrestled in Canada a lot at that time too. So she was not only doing it here in the U.S. but in Canada too. And these women, they were great friends their whole life. That's why they're buried next to each other. And Mae Young actually lived with the Fabulous Moolah up until her death, and at the compound here in Columbia. And they knew when they came back to wrestling, they wanted to do it together. And they also were very, very feisty women. They believed that their bodies could still take it and still handle it. They still believed that the fans should get a real good show. So they would tell the men wrestlers, hey, if you don't give it your all, and you don't bring it, we're not gonna sell for you. We're gonna make it look like you're just a bunch of wimps and you're not even hurting these two old ladies. So you gotta bring it. If you're not doing it in 3 minutes, that's a 3-minute rule. We're not gonna sell to you no more. So the male wrestlers, they had to do it. Some of the best known examples of this is Mae Young being powerbombed through a table in her late 70s twice by the Dudley Boys, my favorite tag team of all time. At WrestleMania, in tribute a few years ago, the WWE actually had a memorial battle royal to the Fabulous Moolah. And this sparked some criticism and a lot of praise. As well as respected as she was and as influential as she was, because of her techniques and how she went about training people and things like that, and the things that were just overall sort of sketchy with the whole thing, some people just don't view her very kindly. Nonetheless, she did pass away of cancer, 2007. Mae Young, almost 7 years later, passed away. Buried here next to each other, here in the Greenlawn Memorial Cemetery, Columbia, South Carolina. I know you're probably wondering because you've probably seen it already. Where is the grave for Katie Glass? Katie Glass, she's actually, from what I have garnered, still living. She was actually a little person, a midget, if you will. And she was actually trained by the Fabulous Moolah, and they actually developed like such a close relationship. She called her mother. It was like a mother-daughter relationship. And let's read about her. So Katie G. Glass, born June the 1st, 1944. Born Katie G. Glass in Richmond, Virginia. The daughter of Fred and Ethel Glass will become the first midget champion in lady wrestling. Katie was named Diamond Lil in the ring, but her dedicated friend and trainer named her the Damned Midget. The Fabulous Moolah, whom Katie called Ma, would train her to become a champion on a midget team. It is love that asks, that seeks, that knocks, that finds, and that is faithful to what it finds. With a little bit of research, she doesn't wrestle anymore. And well, she's obviously older now, but she's quit wrestling quite a while ago because it was hard to find other little people wrestlers that were women at the time. So the lack of competition kind of forced her hand in retirement. And Moolah wanted people to, if they wanted to come visit, they could sit somewhere and not get wet if they wanted to visit with her. So she built it like this for that specific reason, and so her kids and fans could come see and visit. And speaking of her children, she's actually got a plot for them right back there. Now, the Austin Guytons is her family. Some of them are still alive, but it does look like Mary Austin has passed away just a few years ago. But if you look, there's actually, looks like pregnancy pictures, like a ultrasound laid on there. Perhaps that was left by one of the family members. I'm not going to zoom in on it or anything or do speculation like that, but that's interesting. And it's right out here. You turn around, and there's the back side of it. You can see, still says Moolah there, so you can see it from the other side too. So that's going to do it here in Columbia, South Carolina, Greenlawn Memorial Cemetery. The graves of Mae Young, the Fabulous Moolah, 2 pioneering women in professional wrestling, 2 Hall of Famers, 2 champions. May they rest in peace. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, and share. Moon Man, out.